Hello, everyone. Justin McGill here. Today, I want to talk about something that was pivotal to the American Revolution. It was the um, most fundamental point that all of the founding fathers kept coming up against that caused them to rebel against the British government. So, that fundamental issue was whether they were subjects or whether they were citizens. So I'm going to read you from the dissertation on the manner of acquiring the character and privileges of a citizen of the United States. This was written very early on in our country, and it distinguishes between citizen and subject. So it talks about how, because of the American Revolution, a new government was formed, and the principles of this new government being radically different. The character of the people was also changed from subject to citizen. And the author says the difference is immense. Subject is derived from the Latin words sub and jaccio and means one who is under the power of another. But a citizen is a unit of a mass of free people who collectively possess sovereignty. So a subject has a master. A subject is owned by their government, whereas a citizen owns their government. So free people who are citizens have public servants who work in government, whereas a subject is owned by the crown, and the crown decides how things will go, and the subject has to follow what's done. So the American Revolution, the 10, 20 years leading up to hostilities, the abuses that were listed in our Declaration of Independence of the 13 unified states, they distinguish a subject who has to follow whatever they're told to do from a citizen who has inherent rights that cannot be taken away by anyone, by the king, parliament, nobody. We see this mostly through the taxation that was occurring throughout that period. We see protective tariffs like the tea tax that was designed to help the East Indian Trading Company make profits as opposed to foreigners. We see it in the sugar tax, the stamp tax, all the coercive acts of Parliament to try to raise money off of the people of the colonies of America. So we see a lot of writings on the founders on this subject. We see a lot about natural rights starting to come out in their writings. We also understand they didn't have a way to push back against their government before the revolution. So they could send letters to Parliament and request relief. They could send delegations to request relief. But aside from just out and out refusal to follow what they were told to do, there was no recourse through their government. So we see a lot of acts of rebellion throughout the period leading up to the Battle of Lexington, that any one of them could have triggered the revolution. The Boston Tea Party is a great example of that. They not only refused to pay the tax, they destroyed the tea that was at the heart of the issue. So there was a great deal of resistance to being treated as subjects. We've sometimes heard the phrase second-class citizens. In essence, they're just saying they're not actually citizens. They're there to be used and abused at will. So the British government that was over all kinds of colonies, over the entire mainland of Britain with Scotland and Ireland, it was the same government overall, but it didn't treat all of its citizens the same way. Um, and in essence, that's because there were no citizens, they were all subjects. Some of them had more rights than others, but all of them were given to them by the king. So there's a lot of back and forth politics where political prisoners were taken. So somebody who opposed the king would go to prison and be tortured, and it had nothing to do with them violating somebody else's natural rights. It was only a matter of whether or not they were obedient to the government. So that's a great test for today. We need to decide whether we're citizens or whether we're subjects. If you go to jail because you violated somebody else's rights, you've committed a crime. You should be punished for your crime. However, if you're going to jail because all you did was just not obey the government, you're not a citizen, you're a subject. The government owns you, the government tells you what to do, and if you don't do it, there's consequences. So like the founding fathers, we need to decide whether we're citizens and whether we're subjects. We need to decide what that's going to look like. So they say actions speak louder than words. So we hear a lot of people saying that they want their rights, which would be a citizen, but their actions, they constantly ask the government to make them subjects. They ask the government to take care of their retirement. They ask the government to take care of their medical needs. They ask the government to make sure they have a job or to pay them when they don't have a job. They ask the government to be their king. They want to subject themselves to government. Again, the American Revolution was driven by an estimated 3% of the population. Most everybody at that time was happy just being a subject. They just did what they were told to do, and maybe they would grumble and push back a little bit by writing to Congress or to Parliament when they didn't like something, but they weren't actually going to do something about it. So it was just the 3% that was saying, we're tired of being abused and used. We have God-given natural rights, and we're going to stand on those rights. And when the government of England refused to accept the terms that were being given, they simply broke it off. They rejected their old government and created a new one. So I want everybody to be thinking about that. Are you a subject or are you a citizen? And what are you doing about your government if you think you're a citizen? Is your government working for you? Do you have public servants? Or is your government telling you what to do and abusing you or prosecuting you if you don't do what the government says? So take some time, read about the common sense of the patriots, and make a decision. Are you a subject or are you a citizen?